Okay, hi, I'm back. I had at least a couple of weeks of laryngitis where I didn't have a voice, so I had wanted to finish up Sun Tzu's The Art of War a while before I am actually going to do it. But I want to cover chapter 11 and 12, and then I will have one more recording for chapter 13, the final chapter. And I want to let people know I will be moving on to another book. I kind of like this format, so I may not do the entire book, but I'd like people to know about a book by Chris Hedges called The Death of the Liberal Class. And so I'm thinking of covering at least some of that book in the same way that I'm doing this one, kind of chapter by chapter or section by section, and just drawing out the parts that are particularly interesting to me. Excuse me, still working on it. So in Sun Tzu's Art of War, chapter 11, the title is Nine Grounds, and like some of the other chapters in this book, a lot of it is repetitious and has to do with very specific information, in this case about the type of ground. But I just want to highlight a few interesting passages in here that kind of go beyond that. One is in the 17th paragraph where he says, "Ask, if the enemy is large in number and advances, what should be the response? I say, seize what he values, and he will do what you wish." The essential factor in warfare is speed, is the very next paragraph. And then he says, to take advantage of the enemy's lack of preparation, take unexpected routes to attack where the enemy is not prepared. So all of this gives us the sense of sort of impetuosity. And I'll just highlight again the very first part there, seize what your enemy values. That's a little nugget to hang on to. Of course, that requires assessing what does the enemy really value. What's important to the enemy may not be what makes rational sense, so you have to actually observe with your eyes, with your ears, actually observe. Don't just make assumptions based on what you value. But see what the enemy really values. It may be one particular territory, it may be one particular person. So, but if he says if you seize what he values, he will do what you wish. So, but the overall feeling you get here is of impetuosity, as though, the leader ought to be someone who decides fairly quickly. In warfare, the essential factor is speed, because you want to, again, take the enemy off guard, right? You don't want to have the enemy able to catch up to your own reasoning, but you want to take command, as I've mentioned before. Another aspect of this chapter has to do with death ground. I've done a video on death ground specifically, but these are some quotes that definitely deal with what Sun Tzu would have referred to as death ground. In the 24th paragraph, he says, throw your troops into situations where there is no escape, where they will die before escaping. When they are about to die, what can they not do? They will exert their full strength. When the troops are in a desperate situation, they fear nothing. Having penetrated deep into the enemy ground, they are united. When there are no other alternatives, they will fight. Well, that's pretty clear. And again, this is an area where Sun Tzu's realism, or realistic attitude in warfare, is criticized on moral grounds, because clearly he's saying that to get the most out of your troops, you put them into a situation where they have absolutely no choice but to fight. And this is like using your troops as tools. Now, in other places, he humanizes the troops and he emphasizes morale, the relationship between the general and his troops is a human one. And I don't know exactly how to reconcile that with what he says here, but he repeatedly emphasizes in this chapter to, as he says in paragraph 31, throw them into a desperate situation. Okay, and then we have him saying in paragraph 37 something interesting about the honesty with which or lack thereof, that the general should have with his troops. He says it is important for the general to be calm and remote, upright and disciplined, and to be able to mystify his men's eyes and ears and keep them ignorant. He changes his methods and plans and keeps them from knowing. He changes his campsites and takes circuitous routes, keeping them from anticipating. The day the generals lead his troops into battle, it is like the general leads his troops into battle. It is like climbing up high and throwing away the ladder. He leads his troop deep into enemy ground and releases the trigger. He burns his boats and destroys his cooking pots. So there you have a combination of both the death ground idea, burning your boats, destroying your cooking pots means there's no going back, and keeping your troops in the dark, meaning that you understand that first of all, people are easier to lead if you don't give them a lot of time to think about what you're doing and criticize it, which is a fact that Machiavelli knew also. But also that within the troops there's going to be some people who are either spies or susceptible to becoming spies. And so there's a strong message in Sun Tzu, actually, that we will return to in the last chapter on spies, that basically emphasizes you need to be careful to not divulge crucial information to people who don't need to know. Okay, so even though the army may be somewhat upset by being thrown into these situations, so be it, because the risk of divulging too much information too soon is that it will be delivered to the enemy with spies. To complete this part, he says he commands his troops like herding sheep, being herded to and fro without them knowing where they are going. Assembling the masses of the army and throwing them into danger are the responsibility of the general. They're emphasizing it is a moral responsibility. You really, when you keep other people in the dark, you are taking full and absolute responsibility for their lives. Okay, so, and he says this elsewhere, give your troops tasks, but do not reveal them your plans. Get them to face danger, but do not reveal the advantages. Okay. There's just so much like that in this chapter. He ends it by saying something kind of curious. He says, therefore, be like a maiden. Once the enemy opens the door, be like a scurrying hare. The enemy will be unable to prevail. So, well, I guess, good advice. Be like a scurrying hare. You never know where they're going to go. Be unpredictable, right? So, if the enemy is on your doorstep, do not act in predictable ways. Okay. The next chapter, chapter 12, is fire attacks. I don't have a lot to say about this. It is technical. It makes sense. For instance, he says there are appropriate seasons for using fire attacks and appropriate days for raising fires. The appropriate season is where the weather is dry, and the appropriate day is when the moon is in Chi, Pi, I, or Chen, and forgive me for mispronouncing those. These 4 days are when there are rising winds. Well, obviously the point is well taken, and hard to argue with. Observe the seasons of the year, no matter what it is that you are doing, whether it is raising fires or something else. The seasons, the predictable weather at certain times of years, you need to pay attention to those things and not go against them, but use them if possible. Never think that technology will sort of obviate any need to just pay attention to the good old-fashioned facts of weather, terrain, seasons. Yes. At the end of this chapter, there's some caution, which kind of, in a way, seems to contradict the previous chapter with its emphasis on seemingly impetuosity. Sun Tzu says, if it is not advantageous, do not move. If there is no gain, do not use troops. If there is no danger, do not do battle. Okay, that's not contradictory, but it does show the emphasis on prudence. But at the end, he says, the enlightened ruler is prudent, the good general is cautious. This is the way, or Tao, of securing the nation and preserving the army. Well, I don't know if we can totally square these things, but I suppose in the personality of a really great general or leader, you can both square prudence and impetuosity, because such a person will know exactly when the time is right. So our last one will be chapter 13, again, using spies. We'll conclude Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and then we'll move on to Death of the Liberal Class. What a change-up. Anyway, it's a book that I think more people should know a little bit about. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.